Hello and welcome back. So in today's video, we're going to continue our series on React hooks. And in this video, we're going to talk about use effect. So throughout the video, we're going to look at how we can import use effect, how we can initialize use effect, how use effect works, some optimizations that could be done using use effect, and many more. Please relax in your couch, get your snacks, and let's dive into it. Alright, so I know the first question that comes in mind as a beginner is what is use effect? Okay, so use effect basically allow us to perform side effects in our component. Yeah, so I mean side effects. And when I say side effect, what I basically mean is operations, okay, which includes fetching data, updating our DOM directly, and also timers. Okay, so if you want to implement timers in your application and all of that, you can use effect to do that. And we are going to also look at how we can optimize our code using use effect. So first, let's look at how we can import use effect. So again, import, and then we bring our brackets from React. Okay, just like how we did for the use state, right? So here you're going to say use effect, right? And then inside our application, remember in our one of our rules, it stated that hooks can be called at the initial stage of our component, right? So here we can call our use effect. So use effect, and then use effect, let me show you the structure of it. Okay, so use effect basically takes in a function and then dependency. It could be multiple dependencies inside it, right? And then the first one, which is a function, is compulsory, but the dependency is optional, okay, depending on how you want the application to operate. Okay, so when we set the use effect, what the use effect basically does is it runs after the component has mounted. Okay, when I say mounted, when the component starts running, okay, that is when the use effect is called. So use effect is actually called, and then it basically helps you to run this function when the component mounts. Okay, and then when something happens, it tells you to call this function again. Okay, so let's say you want to change the color of a car model, right? So when the dependency, which is the car, changes, you want to run this function which changes the color or which changes the date, whatever update you want to do. Okay, so the dependency actually makes it possible to run this code again. Okay, so it means when you don't bring this dependency, the use effect is going to call this function on any render. Okay, but if you bring a dependency here, it means this function will only be called once, and then after that, whenever there is change in this dependency, the function is being called again. Okay, so that is the basic idea about use effect. It runs once when the component mounts, and then when there is update in the dependency, it runs the function again. If you don't bring any dependency, then it's going to run whenever there is re-render, whenever there is change in the DOM, right? So now let's look at how we can. So I'm going to bring an anonymous function right here, okay? And then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to set again, let's use state here. Sure, by now you already know the use effect, how we can initialize it, right? So I'm just quickly going to do that. I'm going to set the age to 0. Okay, so when the application mounts, right, what I want to do is I want to set timeout. Okay, and then just let's say 5 seconds, right? So after 5 seconds I want to set my age to 10. So what I'm basically doing here is when the application runs, right, I want to set timeout, okay, and I want to change the date, because I'm using timeout because I want us to see the effect. Okay, and then here I'm going to say p and then my age. Okay, then let's bring our age variable here. Great. So we've combined use effect and then use state, right? Now let's go to application. Oops. When we run it initially, it's 0, right? And then after 5 seconds, change to 10, right? So now what happens is it's actually calling it on every render. So let me see if we could do some magics here. Let's see code, right? And then let's go, let's inspect. So when you click on F12 on your application on your keyboard, sorry, or you right click and click on inspect, it's going to inspect it for you. Okay, so here when you see, let's run this, you see code right here. Okay, now let's wait for, and then you see immediately this change, there was a render, so it calls it again, right? Imagine assuming, let's say we had let's say button here, you see, okay, and then this button is to set the age. Okay, let me see, change age, then let me call my on click method here. So set age to, let's say 100, right? Now I'm not going to wait for the 5 seconds. When I click, you see code is being called again, right? And after 5 seconds, code is called again. Do you get it? Nothing will happen again. Nothing will happen again unless I click the change again. It calls it, and then after 5 seconds, the code is being called again. So you see what is actually happening. Okay, it means on every render, this function inside our use effect gets called. And sometimes you might not want it that way. You want the function to be called once, regardless of whatever happens next, right? In that case, you bring square brackets here. So it tells use effect to call this application once. So at the initial stage, it's going to call it, right? And then once we set the age, nothing happens again. Even when we click on this button, previously we realized when we click on the button, it calls this function, right? But now, once you set this to empty bracket, when you click on the button, nothing happens. When there is re-render, nothing happens. So now I'm going to refresh the page just to clear our console. And then as you can see, you have this code. Now after 5 seconds, it changed it. And then you see, we didn't get the code again. Even when we click on change, we are still not getting the code, right? So this square bracket basically tells use effect that only call this function when you are on mount, or when you mount. I mean, when you start running, call this use effect. After that, don't call it again. Don't call this function again. That is basically what's happening right here, right? Sometimes maybe you might want to change. So let's say if I want to create another use here, let's say toggle. And let's set toggle to it's a boolean, so use it false, right? And then here what we want to do is call this function whenever toggle's data changes. So in this case, toggle becomes a dependency. So it means this function depends on toggle whether to run or not. By the initial stage, use effect is going to run it during the first run or the first mounting. Okay, so when it mounts, use effect is going to run this function, and after that, it's only going to run the function when the value of this toggle changes. Okay, so now let's go back. Let's refresh. Now nothing happens, right? Even when I click on change, it doesn't actually call the use effect function again. So now let's create another button which says let me bring a break here. So this function says toggle, right? So now once we toggle our value, right, what we expect is to call the function again. So we are supposed to see code again in our console. So now let me refresh this function. or sorry, refresh the application. Now, if you see, when the age change, nothing happened, right? When I click on change age, nothing happens. The age is being changed, but nothing happens in our console, right? But immediately I click on toggle. Oh my god. So let me click on toggle again. I think. Oh, sorry. So I think we had to change it. We are just passing it here, so nothing is changing. That's why we encounter that. So let's go back again, and then let's run it again. So initial, we get our code here. When the age changes, nothing happens. When you click on age, it changes to 10, but nothing happens here, right? But the moment we click on toggle, right, you see the function is being called again, right? When we click on toggle again, the function is being called again. When you click on toggle again, the function is being called. So now the function depends on the value of the toggle. If the value changes, then call this function. If the value doesn't change, don't call the function. That's why initially when we were passing in just toggle here, they didn't call the function, because the value remained the same. That's why they didn't call it. But once the value changes, it calls the function. Okay, so you can add a list of dependencies right here, okay, which actually helps you. So the real world application, or the application I would like us to do, is create a timer, okay, which actually is going to help us. So count, and then I'm going to set count. Oops, what's happening? I'm going to set count to 0 by default, so I'm going to use my use state. Okay, so 0, and then inside my use effect, I'm going to create a timer. Okay, so here I'm going to call set timeout. Okay, and then I'm going to pass in a function that should be called after let's say a second. Okay, so second is 1000, and then in here I want to call my set count, and then pass in our count, which is our previous count, and then we add 1 to our previous count and return it. Okay, here I would like to keep it empty, so it runs once. Okay, and then in here I would like to say count, so oops, p, then say count. Oops, what's happening? Oh, count, and then let's bring our count variable right here. Okay, so now what is supposed to happen is this function should be called once, and when it's called, wait for a second and then increase our count, right? So now let's save this. Let's go back to our application, right? So I'm going to, I think there is an age somewhere. No, I don't think so. Let's refresh our page. Great. So after a second, that's changed to 2, and nothing happens again, right? Definitely nothing happens again. Okay, so now if you look at this, we've been able to implement a function right here, and then this function is called once here. That is the power of use effect. When we remove this one from there, this function will be called on every renderer. So let's go back, let's run this, and as you can see, it's being called on every rendering, and then the rendering happens when there is change in the state. So when we change the value of this count, this use effect is being called again. Whenever we change, it's going to call the function. Okay, but if you want to call it once, that's when you bring this. If you want to call it based on a variable change, that's when you bring. So we can say change it only when count, like how we did it in the previous example, right? Change it when count changes, right? Which is basically what is happening. So whenever count changes, it's going to change. Now, right now we've been able to set some kind of timer. Okay, now what happens if we leave this for a long run? Because this set count is actually storing some information, that is data, and on a long run it's going to cause memory leaks, because our memory is going to get full at a certain point. Use effect helps us to clear or clean our data. In this case, optimize our application or optimize our code. Again, optimize our data in every way you want to put it, right? And we do this by first saying const timer. Okay, so timer, and then we save whatever we are getting from this here. And then when we come down here, we can destroy it whenever we are returning. Okay, so here we can say return, and then we are going to pass in a function, and then we say clear timeout. Okay, when you use time interval, use clear time interval. So we are using timeout, so clear timeout, and we're going to pass in the timer here. Okay, so in this case, when you leave it for 30 years, there is no data that is being saved somewhere which is going to cause memory leaks. Once it's done using it, it kind of destroys the timer. Okay, whenever it's done using it, it destroys the timer. So now when we go back again, refresh our page, you see it still works, right? So I think our video is getting long and I'm going to end it here. So in this video, we're able to learn how to import our use effect, how we can initialize it by giving it a function here, which is compulsory to give it, right? And then passing a dependency, which is optional. Okay, I mean, that is the basic idea so far as use effect is concerned. And I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you did, kindly click on the subscribe button, like this video, share this video with friends, and please, if you have any doubt, any question, any misunderstanding or anything, please let me know in the comment section. And see you in another video. Happy coding.